I got the camera. Well, good evening. It's been nice chatting. I feel like very home-like. It's good to be back at Whitestone. Let's give Larkin a big round of applause. Thank you, Larkin, for having organizing this. So I'm going to do mostly classical piano and talk about it, and at the end, I'll probably play some Southern gospel. I have a few different things from last time. I'm trying to give you some variety. But I'll start with some short pieces. First, I don't know if I did this last time, but whatever. It's just, this is a nocturne in C-sharp minor by Frédéric Chopin, famous nocturne of Chopin. This is an early work of his. He wrote it as a study piece for his second concerto. Which, oddly enough, he wrote the second before the first. And it's just a very young, very green Chopin, but at the same time, all the hallmarks of his style are there. Some composers are like that, some are not. Doesn't mean quality or not, it's just that some are born as themselves and others find themselves through struggle, perhaps. Maybe Beethoven is like that, was like that. But Chopin, you hear what to me is Polish folk music, that rhythmic thing there. And his big love also, Italian opera. Bellini, Vincenzo Bellini. And you can hear the left hand in this nocturne. Nocturne, by the way, is a night piece. It's appropriate for now. So I played it somewhere in the afternoon and it was but this is like the orchestra in a bel canto opera aria, and then the right hand is the prima donna, the singer. I had a teacher who said, "Do you really want to get Chopin? Yeah, Polish folk music, but also especially Italian opera. Listen to it and feel it." So that's this piece. So here we go. Maybe by now the coffee's cooled down a little bit. Got cold hands today, I don't know what it is, even though it's not that cold. I'm going to play a couple more short pieces and then something sort of long and heavy. So, there we go, it's good coffee. So this is another short piece, similar in its mood. This is Tchaikovsky's Sentimental Waltz, Valse Sentimentale. Just like last time, I'm still sort of doing this theme of violin music, arranged for the piano. Now the last piece, obviously, is a piano piece. But there's a wonderful arrangement of that by Nathan Milstein for violin. And, you know, that piece works beautifully on the violin playing that right-hand melody and the left-hand accompaniment rearranged. So this piece also originally for the piano, and it's arranged for the violin, played very often on the violin. But of course, I'm playing the original piano piece because I don't play the violin. I was too lazy to switch instruments and lacked the courage to. So that's why I'm doing this violin program. Tchaikovsky, like Chopin, he's a master at captivating two different moods at the same time. One is a mood of sort of elation or joy, but at the same time, great sorrow. In a way, music can do that maybe more than language or other, modes of expression. So, and I think about this often, that Tchaikovsky, his colleagues, fellow Russian composers, they didn't consider him Russian enough, whatever on earth that means. Because, look, even the title of the piece is French, Valse Sentimentale. He didn't quite use Russian folk music the way Glinka or Mussorgsky or some others did, but so what? I mean, music doesn't have a nationality. It's one of the beautiful things about it, I think. So anyway, here it is. Let me have a little bit of this and then... Yeah. Got windy outside there. Well, you really read my mind putting coffee there. I was just thinking about it. So I'm going to play another short piece before the big one, the big meat and potatoes piece of today. This is truly a violin piece. It's called Sicilienne by Maria von Paradis, who was a Viennese composer in the 18th century. The problem is, as wonderful as Maria von Paradis was, the piece is actually not by her. It's a forgery. You have those in painting too. And it's by a violinist named Samuel Dushkin. He wrote the piece and he claimed that it was by her. Fritz Kreisler used to do this sort of thing as well, because think about it, if you go and say, here's a piece that I wrote, a lot of people might not be so interested, but if you say, well, Vivaldi wrote it, and I found it in a vault somewhere, people are more prone to take it seriously, I suppose. So I think that's what it is. But nevertheless, a Sicilienne is an 18th century dance. It has a little lilt to it. The rhythm is long, short, long, long, short, long. And it's people associate it with nostalgia. Rousseau wrote about Swiss mercenaries singing Sicilians or playing them on the horns or whatever they had. And it was invoking the feeling of home, nostalgia. So there are a lot of famous Sicilians. I mean, there's this Mozart sonata. That's a Sicilian. 1, 2, 3. Da, 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 da. Silent Night is a Sicilian. There's that rhythm, so it's popular. And anyway, so this is the Sicilian by Paradis, but not really. It's by Samuel Dushkin, one of my favorite musicians, violinists, and humans ever. His name is Ivry Gitlis. He's my hero. He died a few years ago at 98.
And what was the name again?
Ivry Gitlis, Gitlis. He was a violinist. He was just brilliant. And he played this piece a lot in his later years. So, at any rate, that's why I learned it. Well, I better enjoy this before the next 22 minutes is going to be one big piece now. This is something I've been doing recently, and I hope it works. It may not. Is that I'm going to play a piano concerto without orchestra. So, because I didn't bring my orchestra, as you can see. I'm going to play the Franz Liszt first piano concerto by myself. I'm going to try to play some of the orchestra parts. Obviously, I can't play all of them and the solo part at the same time. But this, they would do this in the 19th century in settings like this. There were smaller rooms, you couldn't have an orchestra. So they were less purist than now, where now we're more prone to think, well, if it's a concerto, you ought to play it with it. Well, there were different versions of the concerto. So anyway, that's my justification of doing this concerto. So I mentioned how Chopin was sort of like a natural. And Liszt, I think, was different because the fact is he sketched out this piece when he was, like the themes for it, when he was a young man in his late teens, early 20s. But he didn't complete it until he was in his middle age. So it just goes to show that a lot of good things take time and effort and struggle. And I think it's because the form of this concerto is just so unusual. It is in 4 movements, but they're not really separate movements. They're segueing into each other to make one big piece. It's like one big tone poem. Liszt invented the tone poem, by the way. A tone poem is a piece for orchestra, but it could be for anything that's not following the rules of development like a sonata. It's descriptive. It tells a story. It's a narrative piece. I would argue sonatas are narratives too, but this is specifically narrative. The idea of program music. That's what this is. And Liszt instigated this in a huge way. And furthermore, Wagner, who, not to get into Wagner, it's a big topic, changed music in the arts, also was a horrible person. I won't get into that tonight. But Liszt had a huge, heavy influence on Wagner, probably more than he's given credit for. Also the fact that Wagner married Liszt's daughter, but Wagner was also really Wagner got on Liszt's nerves too, it's a different story, but the idea of the leitmotif in Wagner's opera, which is, it's not really a melody, but it's a musical idea corresponding with a person, a place, or a thing. It's like a musical noun. That comes, I think, from Liszt, because you have that in this concerto, too. Because, look, take a swig here. It's just, I love coffee. Sorry, Laura. It's a powerful thing. So, this is not a melody or tune you could sing. That's like a leitmotif in Wagner. That maybe stands for something or represents something. I don't know what the narrative is of this piece, but perhaps it has something to do with love and with war. I don't know. Liszt was also very nationalistic for his native Hungary. Mm-hmm. Although when he was born, it was Austro-Hungary. And the funny thing about Liszt is he never learned to speak Hungarian. He'd go to Budapest but his native language was German, because that's what they spoke in the village he's from. So it's very interesting. Liszt was a fascinating person with so many contradictions. I'll make a parallel with Jerry Lee Lewis in more recent times. Jerry Lee Lewis really was torn between the lifestyle of rock music, not only the music, but the rock musicians, and also with the ministry, because Jerry Lee Lewis wanted to be a pastor, but he was kicked out of the Waxahachie Bible Institute in Texas. Liszt was, at many points in his life, he tried to become a priest. He was very religious. At the same time, how to say this nicely, wine, women, and song. He also had that side of him. And he was like a rock star, too. There is a story, I'll tell you later, maybe. Anyway, I'll get to this piece. So good luck to all of us. I don't know. It's maybe playing it is a crazy idea, but we'll see. So Liszt's first piano concerto without orchestra. Hope my hands warm up in the middle. And I have some more variety of softer things now. So don't worry. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Certainly.
How in the name of heavens do you memorize something like that? Do you have a photographic memory?
No, I wish I did. It would help.
I mean, I just cannot imagine.
How long did it take you to learn it?
A few months, but it's hard. It's
Yeah,
just
I'd
staying
say
up
so.
late because I'm not a morning person, and it's just suffering and agony, and then eventually you remember it, and then hopefully it stays. But anyway, I mean that's the list. I'm gonna play some more mellow things again, so don't worry, not to fear.
You woke us up.
Well, I woke myself up. But yeah, Liszt, he was a phenomenon, and I think Liszt, he changed music, and he was just brilliant. And I'm going to play a very short piece by someone that Liszt and they absolutely hated each other, Liszt and this composer, with a burning passion, Johannes Brahms. Brahms was a bit younger, and Brahms as a young man was traveling to meet the great composers, and he went to Liszt in Weimar. And, I'll say Liszt was a great man. He was actually, there's a mistaken idea in some circles, especially in academia, that he was a charlatan showman, and that's just not true. He was, the range of what he did, okay, obviously there are some moments in that concerto that are just, virtuosity and showing off, but there's others that are so rich and profound. And so what I'm saying is Liszt was not superficial at all, but he was not humble. I'll tell you that. He was not a humble person. He said, "Le concert, c'est moi," taking Louis XIV and changing. He would go to royalty after his concerts and give them his hand to kiss. He would wear these white gloves and sit down and toss them onto the floor. And then when he'd leave, his legions of female admirers would run up and try to grab. So when young Brahms came to him, what did Liszt do? Did he say, "Let me make you a cup of coffee, come in, let's talk"? No, he said, "I'm going to play you, my B minor sonata for you now." It's even longer than that, 2 times longer than that. And young Brahms fell asleep. And you can imagine after that, not a good idea. And so they hated each other, and but they stood for different things musically. Because if Liszt was a musical progressive, he was trying to change the language of music. You can hear that in there. I mean, you have some very unusual things, which at that time that was radical stuff to do, or just Liszt was a pioneer. And Brahms was looking back. Brahms loved Renaissance music. He loved Bach. He collected scores. He was just a different kind of person. He was looked to the past. He was a classicist, not without feeling. That's not what I mean. And on that note, I will say that, and this is where I don't mean to be People magazine or whatever, but he had a very close relationship with Clara Schumann, who was the widow of Robert Schumann, great composer and pianist herself, and quite a bit older than Brahms. And Brahms, I think it was after he met Liszt, he went to the Schumanns. He was just trying to get advice as a young composer. The Schumanns welcomed him in. He actually lived in their home. And Robert Schumann, who's one of my absolute favorite composers, he promoted Brahms. He said, "This man is a genius." And sadly, Robert Schumann, who had a lot of illnesses, mental illness, and he tragically died. He tried to kill himself. It's a very tragic story. He died when Brahms was there. Brahms actually helped Clara and everything. And so they remained very close friends. And the reason I'm saying People magazine, some people speculate that they were romantically involved. It's not clear. But whatever it was, their letters are so passionate and charged. And I think that that's a fundamental part of Brahms's life. And I think that we all know people like Brahms in the sense that, and his music's like this, on the surface, very placid, almost, but underneath, volcanic in its feeling. There's people like this. I think he was very formal, except for that giant beard that he grew at the end of his life. He looked like Santa Claus when he was old. I actually saw a man at a Harley Davidson biker bar once. I don't know why I was maybe not there, but I was like near it. And he was and he looked like Brahms. I mean, obviously he wasn't wearing the same clothes as Brahms, but if you look up a picture of Brahms, you'd see, this giant beard. I wanted to say something, but then I thought maybe it wouldn't be such a good idea.
He'd probably say, who?
Well, there's this. So here's the Waltz in A flat by Brahms. It's a very famous piece and very short. I tell you, there's something for everyone. If you don't love the long, crazy list piece, I have shorter ones. So now another 19th century gloriously bearded composer, Antonin Dvorak, Czech composer, and I'm going to play a couple things of his. First is a arrangement of his Songs My Mother Taught Me, which is from the Gypsy songs. And I'll say that, Gypsy music it is the folk music of Eastern and Central Europe. And Dvorak loved it very much and was influenced by it. Another interesting part of Dvorak's life was that he was in this country for a while, taught in New York. He taught a whole generation of American composers in the late 19th century. And he was encouraging them to learn or to absorb what he said was our folk music, Native American melodies, African American spirituals, and he was telling the composers here to incorporate those things into their music. And he went to Iowa one summer. There's a Czech community apparently in Spillville, Iowa. Spent a summer there, and he wrote the American String Quartet there. And then he later wrote the New World Symphony, which incorporates American music. So he was a really great person. I can tell you this story. This is a silly story. I have so many odd stories, but I know this person, I won't say who absolutely detests Dvorak with a passion. And I asked this person, finally, because I love Dvorak, I said, well, why do you hate Dvorak so much? They said, I feel like I'm on a farm. I could smell the cows almost, because the music has this kind of rural quality. And I said, you've given me two reasons to love him even more. One is I love rural areas. Coming from New Jersey, there are none. Well, there are, but not where I was. And number two, the fact that you hate him so much is because sometimes hate is a strong, love or hate is in music. It's maybe a good sign. So anyway, back to the original point that Dvorak, I just love his music. And this piece, if I were to sing it, which I don't, nevertheless in Czech, the text is very moving. There's a version of Paul Robeson singing it in English. It's fantastic. And it says, the words are, I recall the songs that my mother taught me, and now I teach them to my children today. So, here it is. The decaf really helps. Warm me up. I'm watching the time. I don't want to like overstay my welcome here. So, let's see. I'll play a couple more classical and maybe a little Southern gospel. Why not? So here is a piece. Oh wait, what am I going to do now? Okay, I'll do this one. So this is a piece called Guitar by Polish composer Moritz Moszkowski. Moszkowski lived at the turn of the last century. He was 100 or so years ago very popular, but not so much now. And I think the reason is because his music is sort of bubbly and in a salon style. It's like salon painting is not so popular now. And I think it's too bad because a lot of the classical music world, they want only the heavy, serious stuff, like. And this Moszkowski is in a very different vein, obviously. He's more light and airy. And this piece reminds me of the bubbles in champagne or in Coca-Cola or whatever you like, but it has that feeling to me because it's, you know, that charm, that old world charm it has. So But Mussorgsky was very popular for pianists like Vladimir Horowitz played his music a lot, and wonderful, wonderful composer is what I'm getting at, and somewhat forgotten, neglected. So this piece, Guitar, it's emulating Spanish flamenco music somewhat. Pablo de Sarasate, who was a violinist, Spanish violinist, of course, heard this and told Mussorgsky, you ought to arrange it for violin. And he did. And that's the version that's normally done. So I'm playing the original piano piece because, like I said, I don't play the violin. So, yeah, they're almost identical. Here it is. Yeah, it has humor. That's the word. It has humor, sense of humor. Music, classical music can be funny. Look at what the Looney Tunes did to it. I mean that in a good way. So, speaking of Looney Tunes, this is called La Chasse, the hunt. Back full circle to, I'm saying that because of the Looney Tunes, Elmer Fudd and whatnot. So, this is back to Franz Liszt. This is Franz Liszt's arrangement of Paganini's Caprice from the 24 Caprices La Chasse. I think last time I played a couple of these arrangements, but not this one. This is newer for me. So, and it's called The Hunt. Well, first I'll tell you about Paganini. Paganini was this late 18th century, early 19th century violinist, sui generis, and a wild man, really. Liszt modeled himself in many ways after Paganini. And many thought that Paganini was possessed. He was very controversial at the time. Even the way he played, even the way he looked, he was this kind of wild man. And Liszt heard him as a young man. This was at the end of Paganini's life, but Liszt was a young man. He heard him in Paris at a point at which Liszt had been quite depressed. Heard Paganini and it just electrified him. And he locked himself in a room after hearing Paganini and practiced incessantly for several years. And in that period, he arranged a lot of Paganini's music for the piano. to translate, to channel what Paganini was doing on the violin to the piano, that fire and virtuosity. So it's called The Hunt because this, that was wrong, but that's the sound of hunting horn calls. In those days, they'd use hunting horns or French horns, or the predecessor of a French horn. Now, I don't know anything about hunting, being a Jersey guy, but maybe someone can correct me, but I have a few thoughts about this. One is they didn't have cell phones, although today there's that outage, so it's kind of like being in the 18th century, but the AT&T outage, you know. But they couldn't, the hunters needed to know where the other hunters were, so maybe they would use French horns to say, you know, don't, you know, come to this area or whatever. The other thought is maybe the horn calls would attract certain animals, I don't know, or alert them, or foxes get them out of their holes, or so, I don't know. But it's not like you could walk into a Walmart in those days and buy a duck whistle or something. So you had to use some other equipment, so the horns. But at that time, there's this whole idea of musical symbolism, and that things like everyone at that time, when they heard that, they would immediately associate it with the countryside and hunting. We have this too. I mean, when you hear the national anthem, you stand up. That's a musical associated symbolism. So it's the same thing, or similar. It's not the same thing, but the idea. So anyway, here is this crazy arrangement of Paganini, Liszt, La Chasse, the hunt. is a very different genre, although, well, I mean, all music's really the same in a way. This is Rank Stranger, an Albert E. Brumley gospel song. It's usually done by, like, the Stanley Brothers did it. It's an Appalachian gospel song. So see how it works on the piano. The text is very moving. It's, I wandered alone to my home in the mountains. You've probably heard it. It's famous. Where in youth's early dawn I was happy and free. It's this nostalgic song. So. Something I've been just trying to throw together recently is a Southern gospel down by the riverside. I'll see what I can do with this. I'll close with another upbeat one. That's new. That's very new. This is a very old one. The Bringing in the Sheaves. You know it probably. It's old. I mean, from the 1850s maybe. So. Well, I think we can call it a night there. Is it? Yeah, I did a little more than an hour. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Martin, for having me.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
You like the fast pieces.
Well, I like them. I like both. I like slow ones too.
Yeah.
It just depends on the
You give
mood you want to.
Give your hands a good workout.
Well,